a little louder, that song, if you really wanted to see him. You sing like you wanted to see me. But we're talking about seeing him. Amen. Don't you want to see him? I've heard, amen, I want to see him. Look upon his face. I've heard more people say in the last few months, even so come, Lord Jesus. I'm looking for Jesus to come. We need to be looking for him and excited about him coming. Take us away from this sinful world. It's such a delight to see you. I got so many texts and calls of men who could not come, either having COVID or exposed to COVID or having a funeral or having a wedding or something. But I'm glad you made it tonight, and you're in for a treat, this Bible study. We're delighted to have Dr. Harold and Layla Bear with the doctors, Harold and Layla. Both of them have their doctorate degree. Harold is a native North Carolinian. Many of you knew Lonnie Bear, his father. And he left North Carolina, tried to help Virginia out as much as he could. He pastored for 34 years at Covenant Church in Charlottesville, Virginia, did an outstanding job. He was a leader in his community, leader in the state, in the Church of God. He has a doctorate in sociology, and Layla has a doctorate in human resource. And this wonderful man and woman of God. Since he retired from pastoring, he has been traveling across the country, visiting pastors, and just sitting down and talking with them about their needs and about their concerns. Now, I haven't sent him. I've blessed him to be sent. He's met several of our ministers here in the state. We don't talk about you. I don't tell him what I think about you. He doesn't tell me what he thinks about you. It is a non-threatening environment. He just sits down and tries to hear your heart and tries to offer any suggestions. He's going to be here tomorrow, tonight, during the session tonight, and again in the morning. Now, in the morning, we're going to have the Bible study in the conference center, just so it'll be a little close fellowship up there. In fact, got muffins by Hannah Presley. If you've ever had any of Hannah's cupcakes, you'll certainly enjoy her muffins in the morning, coffee and muffins. And we invite you to come at 9 o'clock. Now, again, COVID is still out there, folks. If you want to wear a mask, wear a mask. I'm not offended. If I have one on, don't you be offended at me either. It's still out there, and we want to protect you as much as we can. And we're just delighted to have the Bears, and we want you to bless them, welcome them, and let's welcome them to Western North Carolina. Come on, Brother Bear. I did want to mention that we served together on the Board of Trustees for the Pentecostal Theological Seminary, and we actually sit beside each other because of alphabetical order. He's a Bear, and then I'm a Bell. But we get to sit beside each other, but it's a delight to serve with him. We're delighted to have you. We give it to you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Bell. It is a real honor and a privilege for Layla and I to be with you. And this is going to be a challenging proposition. I hope we have a mic that we can rotate and maybe take a few questions, because being from college teaching and other kinds of things in the past, I like to have some opportunity for people to respond. In fact, when I preach as a guest minister, I oftentimes just stop and I say, well, you don't know me and I don't know you. Anybody got a question, anything you want to know about me, any question you have? And so I'm a very open person like that. It doesn't bother me. It is true. We actually pastored 39 years in Charlottesville to the day. And on just for your understanding, 39 years, and the buildings grew and the congregation grew, and from all white people to over 20 nations. And when the final day came, I preached my last sermon, and I took my keys out of my pocket. I had a master key to all the locks, and I said, some 53 doors, I think, and I said, sir, to the new pastor, you are now my pastor, and I handed my key, and tomorrow someone will need to unlock this facility for me. And 5 days later, we left town. We've been on the road since then, about 40,000 miles by car, 2 flight trips from Montana to Georgia, and from San Antonio to Maine. And we leave here, go to Kentucky, and back to Alabama, and back to Tennessee, and back to Virginia, and to Indiana, and possibly to the West Coast. And as you can see, I have gray hair. And so I'm not going to tell you my age at this point in time, but we're well and we're blessed, and God has greatly honored us. And one more thing I will share with you, that if I ever preach for you, I have to say this. About 2.5 years ago, I had pancreatic cancer, so I have a surgery scar about that long in my abdomen. And I had to take chemo until it was killing me, and they said it will kill you if you keep taking it. And so I stopped. I'm 2.5 years out, clear. The doctors say they don't see any sign of cancer. And so I'm praising the Lord for, as you know, that's the most deadly cancer there is, and some say only 5% are alive in 3 years. And so one doctor actually looked at me and he said, we don't understand, just go do what Jesus wants you to do. I mean, that's what he actually said to me in his office, the oncologist. And so we're very humbled to be with you and very privileged. And now what we've done, you must understand this. Layla is here, and she will certainly have something to say. But I want you to understand just a little bit of background. Since we left Covenant, August a year ago, in these travels, we've been in Church of God, Assembly of God, Pentecostal Wholeness. Layla, you'll have to help me. Keep your mic up. Pentecostal Wholeness. Mennonite, and they actually financially sponsor us some on these trips. And Baptist, I was a guest professor at Wake Forest University because one of my proteges is the department head at Liberty University, and he heads up a doctoral program at Wake Forest Baptist Seminary. So a Pentecostal minister was a guest professor at Wake Forest. That opened doors to us to the Baptist churches. I don't tell them I'm Pentecostal. I tell them I'm a professor who has lectured at Wake Forest, and they say, oh, well, come on. So I've actually presented to Baptist ministers and have some who are in constant dialogue.
But then they know before you, yeah.
Then they know, but they don't care then.
You get in the door, right.
So Layla, that's not all though. We've also been in
Church of God.
Church of God, Presbyterian, charismatic, independent, and also we try and do that partly so that when we speak to you, we're kind of represented. We think we have a pretty good pulse of what's happening in America. Now here's one of the interesting things that we've found. Layla, what kind of songs do they sing in these churches? Same songs.
Yeah, basically the
same songs. From Mennonite to Independent Baptist they all sing the same songs. Isn't that fascinating? That's fascinating. So that tells us something.
Just different amounts of times over in the different churches.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
Mennonites sing straight through. Yeah, go ahead.
This is, Layla is a much more methodical presenter than me. I'm a little more open to dialogue and all than she is, but I've asked her to be with me and to keep me on cue, because what we have here are actually 8 subjects that are the heart of ministry. Now, there are a couple of others I just knew we wouldn't have time to even touch on, but these are all critically valuable to ministry. And the first one tonight for the next few minutes, and you have the blue sheet. I'm not going to repeat that. I've never liked to go to conferences and have somebody read to me. And so I'm not going to read to you what's on that blue sheet. But if you do speak, just keep it to 15 to 30 seconds. And so if you'll keep that in mind. But if you will, please, we're going to pay attention for the next few minutes to the idea of family. Family. Now, what do we know about family? The Bible says God sets the solitary in families. So God's a family God. I mean, you see ducks, they go in families. Birds, they go in, right? You see them flying through the air, they're together. And so, you know, all the animals, they stick to families, species, and human beings. God, we're the social creatures. Social means human. We're social creatures, and we exist with family. We now know that COVID is actually psychologically damaging our children because of their restriction and lack of socialization. So we're family. And as a church body, we have to pay close attention to that. But there's 2 things. Now, my friends have been chiding me because I used a word on the blue page that is bifurcate. And that's not a cuss word. It means to divide. Okay? 2 things. Here's what I want you to keep in mind. My passion for you as a minister, our passion. We're both preachers, kids. All of our entire lives have been spent in pastors' homes. Totally. Birth on. So here's what I want you to leave with when we finish up tomorrow evening. 1, I want you to leave with an absolute convinced attitude that there is something you can do in your personal life that will improve who you are as a person. having nothing to do with ministry. What are you going to do to improve yourself? So we're going to talk about that. Then what are you going to do to improve your talents and skills to be a pastor or to be a church leader or whatever ministry you have? Now, I think those two things have to be very intentional. And every day of your life, I think you got to follow two tracks. One is to improve your personal talents and skills. And two is to improve your ability to serve God. And what do we know about church families? We know that about 20% of pastors suffer divorce. We know that most women in ministry divorce before going into ministry, and most men who divorce after they're in ministry. So we know that. So about 20% of pastors in America actually suffer divorce. Now that is across denominational boundaries. I want to think it's lower than that in the Church of God, and frankly I do not know of a valid scientific study in the Church of God that measures this. And so I'm hoping that it's less. But we also know that it's happened in the Church of God. And it's happened in most of our families. Am I right? We can pretty much, all of us mention somebody. But that's not just divorce. That's not the whole picture. There's more to family than just marriage and divorce. And let me just hasten to say, we've been married 55 years, and I still don't understand this woman. I told her today, you are the boss because I let you be the boss. Yeah, right. We all understand. We make jokes about it. But, you know, I'm the one who gets up and gets coffee for her in the morning.
May the boss speak.
Go ahead.
Okay. I just wanted you all to know that this man is standing here to teach you to talk about marriage and successful marriages. And there was one morning this week we woke up and he wouldn't even speak to me. I said, good morning. And he says, I'm not speaking to you today.
I'm mad at you.
I'm mad at you. And so why was that?
Well, because I had a nightmare that I caught her smoking. And it took me all morning long to get over that.
So if he gets on me tonight, you might see me go like this, and that will get him off track, and there we go. No.
So here we are. What are we going to do about this? What about children? Some of you have lost children. We've lost a child. Just a few weeks ago, we exhumed the body of our son in Newport News, and we personally carried his coffin to Salem and watched, and we had a funeral service 51 years later. I know what loss is. We know what loss is. And I've had siblings who've divorced, church members who've divorced, and brokenness and death. Yes, Leila.
And I just want to say, because you've had something like that happen in your family does not mean that you're not going to have a successful ministry. It means Satan's trying to attack. But we actually had our elder son went through a divorce he did not want. There were 4 children. And people in our church, he stayed faithful to God, stayed in church. People came up to us and said, you know, really, this is kind of good for us in a way. Not that Danny had to go through that. But when we would see your family standing up front on Easter or Christmas, it was always the perfect family. Nothing ever happened to y'all. And now we've seen you walk through this divorce, and we know that you have suffered some of the same things we have, and we've seen how you've acted, and we can follow that. So, you know, it can be something that God works through for your church, even though you don't want to go through it.
You want to know how that came together? 14 years after marriage, her wife just literally, she's a church member. I was her pastor. And she just said, I want him out of my house tonight. That was it. It was over. He was totally, I don't know how he lived through it. 14 years passed, and a lieutenant colonel whose husband had dropped dead in front of her 2 children came to Covenant Church, and she said, I'm having a house dedication. Will you come? Yes. So while I was there, I said, well, you know, I see a few things. I'm a family of builders, and I see my cousin here, Mike Burke, and others, or Teddy Burke, sorry, Mike's his cousin. And I said, we're all pretty much builders on all sides of our family. And I said, I see some things in your home. She said, oh, tell me, because she said, I'm not a builder. I don't understand, but I know there are things. I said, well, my son is. And I said, I'll put you in touch with him. A couple weeks later, I said, well, you know, did my son get, oh, yes, well, he's been here. We've already talked with thus and so. And a couple weeks later, he called his mom, and he said, Mom, what would you say if?
He says, if I told you that Davina and I are talking. And I knew exactly what he meant because Davina is black. And I said, well, son, we can't teach and preach one thing and live another. And he said, I thought you'd say that, Mom, thanks. And so they've been married now.
So our daughter-in-law is African-American, and I have 2 African-American grandchildren. And then our son, whom we adopted while I was teaching at Virginia Tech, we found out he's half Peruvian. And then he just recently, a year ago, married a Venezuelan. And they just had a child, so we have a 75% grandchild, 3 months old. And,
Hispanic,
yeah,
75%.
Hispanic. And so, you know, our family is blended. But you know how that happened? Well, it happened because at Covenant Church, I said, you know, look, we got to welcome people. We had been fortunate at Virginia Tech to actually attend a transcultural church. Never known either one of us anything different than that all of our lives up to that point. But while we're working on our doctorates at Virginia Tech, we attended that church and we liked it. And when we went to Charlottesville, I had no intention of being a pastor, but when I became a pastor, I said, God, you got to do something. And so finally, God did add to us some color and then other color. Then we got involved in refugee work. And we won people from many nations of the world and actually had 5 ethnic congregations, actually a Chinese congregation of 50 people chartered out and went independent. We had 5 ethnic congregations that met independent of our 2 English congregations. And so on Sunday morning, when I looked out, our people were like salt and pepper all mixed together in the congregation. And so I had to learn a whole lot about family of church, and how that interacted with our family.
I told them they looked like a picture of heaven because that's what heaven's going to be. It's not going to be all white. It's not going to be all black. It's going to be all of us together.
So our children in the mix of all of this, what are you going to do about children in ministry? Well, we made sure our children never heard the things that were breaking our hearts and that were going wrong. We would retreat and talk about it privately or go riding. And our children would hear and they would say...
Well, we would never talk church problems in front of our children. And then they'd come to us and they would have found out something. They said, you didn't tell us such and such. And we'd say, yes, we know. And they said, well, we just don't tell you all things like that. We don't want to be the ones spreading that. And they said, well, every other kid in the church knew it. And we said, that's okay. But all 3 of our children are in church and serving the Lord. And we think part of that is that we did not share the church problems with them. We wanted them to love the church people. And oddly, they would love the people that were hurting us the worst.
Oh, my goodness.
They'd come home and say, I love Brother so-and-so.
Oh, my goodness. Somebody doing us so wrong, and our kids would just climb up in their laps and hug and kiss them, and we'd be wanting to kick them in the shin and slap them.
I'm here to kind of keep him down a little bit.
So when we punished our children, they would say, you're punishing me because I'm a preacher's kid. I said, no, if I were a school teacher, a banker, a lawyer, if I were a contractor, I'd be punishing you the same way I'm punishing you now. I'm not punishing you because you're a preacher's kid. I'm punishing you because you're Harold and Layla Bear's child. And this is the way we want you to grow up. See, there are things about family we need to learn. You don't talk some things in front of your children. You don't ever talk about church members in front of your children. You don't ever allow your children to talk negative. Our children, from early on, I would tell them that one of the harshest disciplines you will ever encounter from your dad will be if you disrespect your mother. And children are born psychologists. How many of you believe that? I mean, they're born psychologists. When Dana was like 18 months old, or 2 years old or so, and Danny was 4, I would put them in their separate bedrooms and kiss them good night, and we'd have prayers with them, and I'd say, now look, y'all stay here. Yeah, until about 1 o'clock in the morning, and then the door would open, and a little beautiful little girl would come in. And which side of the bed did she go to? Anybody want to help me with the psychology? She came to Daddy's side of the bed. You think Daddy's going to tell her to go back and get in her bed? You're out of your mind. And then comes in big boy Danny. Which side of the bed did he go to? Oh, he's going to go to Mama. He still does. He's Mama's boy. Both of them are our sons. The one's adopted. They'll call her and talk to her about things they don't think I'm going to listen. Sometimes they'll say to me, hey, Pastor, I need your attention.
Okay, that's how our children would get his attention when he was pastoring. They said, Dad, 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 and he'd be, Pastor, what? So that they learned to call him to get his attention.
Now,
he's not all that bad, but I think he's pretty typical. Some of you wives can attest to that.
If you read the blue sheet, please do, because I don't think I've been through anything that you've not been through. I think you've been through everything that I've been through, and I'll have a few books tomorrow morning if Dr. Bill will allow me to make them available to you, about 40 or so monthly Sundays, and they're stories of being a pastor. And I actually wrote those stories, published a book, Layla and I did, saying we think this happens to all pastors. And just the other day, Johnny Caldwell, he got a hold of the book and he read it. He said, oh my goodness, I lived that book. I would read one and I would say to my wife, you got to listen, this happened to me. Because I think it happened to you too, don't you? I think it happened to you. So commonness. When you understand that, you put the devil in his place. You know, one of the worst things the devil can do to you is convince you that you are unique. He tells you you're different. You're going through something nobody else has ever gone through. Now, in psychology, and having done a lot of counseling, that's when people commit suicide, when they convince themselves that nobody else has ever been there but them, and nobody can help them. Now, we wouldn't go that far as Pentecostals, but we will let the devil tell us we're going through something nobody else has been through, and we'll actually believe it, and it's not true. And so when you realize that, then you get a grip on it. Layla, what was you going to have to say here?
Well, I'd like to open up to questions if we've said something that has just caused a question to arise within you, or if you want to differ with us on something, you have every right to do that.
Anybody got a question or something you'd like for us to comment on? No, if not, I don't waste time. When I do guest lectures in colleges, I go till the bell rings. And so I don't ever let out early. And Bishop Bell, you just raise your hand and say, that's enough, Dr. Bear, stop. But let me share with you, it is important to you that you define who you want to be, whether you're a man or a woman, define it and decide, this is the character of my family. This is who we're going to be. You should meet with your children, sinners and saints all alike, in-laws and those who are whoever in your family. Get them all together around the dinner table and say, hey, this is the character of this family. I'm the head. I'm the chief. And this woman and I agreed. So Layla and I have had that meeting, Thanksgiving, I think, a year ago, or Christmas a year ago, with all of our clan. And we said to them, you must understand that we have helped you to get up and going. We've helped you to get homes. We've helped you to get college. And we have blessed you, and we will continue to help you. But understand, this man and this woman are not done yet. And we're going to go serve the Lord, and we're going to give away. And if we die before Jesus comes, you're not getting all of it. We looked down the table, and we said, you're not getting all of it. We've already written our will, and we put God in our will. We're putting God in our will. And we'll talk about that later. But what you're doing is you're saying, this is the character of my family. I'm the head of it. And that's what you should do. Now, remember, the character of your family should be separate. I'm going to finish with family here, if you don't mind. We're going to move to the next subject because you need to understand this. About 38 years ago, when we were students at the University of Virginia, we were in the dental clinic, and I went in to get a cleaning, and a doctor came. He stood before me. He left. He brought another doctor. He left. 3 of them came. Chief doctor stood in front of me. We found a knot on the inside of your gum. We think it's cancer. Think you need to have surgery. I said, when? Soon? I said, it was like Tuesday. I said, Monday of next week. Put me on the calendar. And so I had surgery and had a tumor taken off inside. I don't have time to tell you the miracle of that story, but a doctor from Johns Hopkins who had just come there did surgery that other doctors marveled at. And he discovered I have 2 of those growths. And one of them still there. And every year I'm supposed to have an x-ray of that tumor for the rest of my life from then on. And so here's the thing you must understand. That time, the miracle of that doctor, he actually used a microscope and flayed my nerves back and put them back in place, and I have 100% filling. Next time they cut here, and it may be half of my jaw. Now, I ask you, if I have to go next week, if I get a pain, I go and I get surgery, and they cut half of my jaw, and I can't preach, what am I going to do for Jesus? Am I going to fold up and die? What are you going to do if you can't preach, preacher? How are you going to put rice on the table? We're going to talk about that in another session. Layla, say something and we'll move the subject.
Okay, I want to say something to the women. Women, you are the thermostat of your home. You know, you don't reflect the temperature, you set the temperature of your home. And I just wanted to say to you that your main job is to your man. You can do everything in church that needs to be done, but if you neglect your husband, you are not doing what God has called you to do. Everything you do in the church, you can train someone else to do. To teach the little kids, you may love doing it. Even to play the piano if you have to, or teach them how to chord or whatever. But there is one job that only you can do in the whole church, and that is be a good wife to your husband. And he needs that. He needs that because he's out on the battlefield, and you're there with him. And I think my husband has said part of his healing from this pancreatic cancer surgery was the peace of our home.
Yes, absolutely.
God gave us very special times like that.
We never had a bad day, Layla.
No, we did not. We never had a day that we didn't trust that God was going to bring us through. And I would play the piano. I have this style of playing that puts people to sleep. Well, I would play and he'd go to sleep. That was fine. That was part of his healing. If you have read about what sleep does for your body, you know, and he would be praising the Lord, you know, and then I'd look over and he'd be sound asleep, but that's okay. I was doing it for the Lord, and the Lord was using that.
Every once in a while, on a Sunday morning, I would bring this woman up and I would say, Layla and I are so pleased to serve you, and we consider it a great honor, and I want you to know that this is the love of my life. And we met at Lee, and we have traveling through life together, and we've been married this long, and I might even call our children up and our grandchildren, in-laws, and have them all stand around, have them sit back down, and I'd say, Layla, I love you, and I would kiss her kind of gently on the cheek or something on a Sunday morning, and give her a little hug, and have her sit down. And you say, so? Well, you know what I'm really saying to every woman that's out there, and there have been a few who've tried? If you mess with me, this woman will claw your eyeballs out.
And he would tune me into certain women. He'd say, when you see this lady headed for me, you get by my side.
Now, I've got to tell you the other side of that. The other side of that is when a woman comes up and puts her hand on my arm like this right here and stands too close, my face gets red as a beet, and I panic, and Layla across the room, she's cracking up because she knows she's got to come to the rescue. So that's the other side of that story, okay? But the same thing's true the other way. Same thing's true the other way. I think I got a pretty good-looking woman, and so I want to take care of her, and I don't want somebody else taking care of her. And the last thing I'll leave you with, out there, all you men, if you're married and you have a spouse, when's the last time you went on a date? You can't have a healthy family if you don't love with your spouse. When's the last time you went on a date? When's the last time you just cruised in and say, honey, throw a suitcase together? And she said, what? Where are we going? I don't know where we're going, but I filled up the car with gas and we're leaving town. So sometimes in the course of things, as we travel, we actually give people money to go out on a date. We tell them, you can't spend this. No, you can't give it away, Pastor. No, you can't give it to a missionary. No, no. You can't give it to the orphanage home. No. This is for you and your wife to go out and have a pleasant evening. All right, let's change subjects. All right, are you ready to change subjects? Let's talk about the next one. What's the next one? Layla?
Well, I just wanted to read the scripture that goes with this one. If anyone does not provide for his relatives, and especially those of his own household, he has denied the faith and is worse than an infidel.
Now, you'll notice I put a prayer in there and made it a prayer all the way through the same prayer. And it's simply, I will read this. Lord, give us pure hearts, clean hands, and an humble spirit to learn from you as we explore challenges for the mission to which you have called us. Listen to this. Help us to listen to the voices of others and respect the wisdom you have given them. Is that okay? Yeah, because I think there's wisdom in the body. You see, when I don't know something, I call up somebody that I think knows. My protege, who's head of the Department of Geography at Liberty University, is a specialist in study. He's done Gallup polls and all kinds of things. When I don't know something, I say, hey, Dr. Bradshaw, thus and so. Hey, I'll get back to you. So he just throws me articles and information. And then maybe I'll call Ollie Lee, who's my professor at Lee University. I say, Ollie, let's just talk about a concept. I mean, I stay in touch with people, and I dialogue. I assume I don't know. I assume I don't know everything. So I am not embarrassed to ask. Okay? Let's talk about the next one. Scripture, it came to pass in the time that he, Potiphar, had made him overseer of his house and over all that he had, that the Lord blessed the Egyptian's house for Joseph's sake. Let's talk about finances. How about finances? You have a budget? You have a budget for your home. You have a budget for your church. You know how many churches operate? They operate with a bucket budget. You know what a bucket budget is? They put all the money in a bucket, and they just take it out and pay bills, and there's no rationale. Just whichever bill comes due, they just reach in the bucket and take it out. One day it's empty, and then they panic. That's a bucket budget.
Could I tell them about our first treasurer?
Please.
Okay, our little church of 17 people, and wonderful, wonderful man that kept the money and dealt with the money. And every Sunday he would bring us back the same tithe envelope to use again. These things cost money, Brother Bear, and there's no need for us to use a new one every Sunday. So he was that honest. He was that frugal. But we went to his home one time. He says, let me tell you how I keep the money. He says, see this drawer right here? And he opened a drawer and it had change in it. He says, if I have more money than it says I'm supposed to have, I put it in here. And then the next Sunday, if I don't have as much as I'm supposed to have, I take it out here and put it and make it up what it's supposed to be.
And he probably had close to half a gallon of change in the drawer, so he could always balance it out.
Now, we were working with a good-hearted man that loved the Lord, that had never been trained for the job, and he took it on as his responsibility.
Absolutely.
We trusted him.
And
we
he
still
stayed
do.
clerk of the church, Layla, till he died.
Yes.
Even after I left, they kept him honorary clerk. And they finally got, he was almost blind, and they would just put pennies in front of him, let him move them around, and just
Counting
keep
pennies.
him, to honor him. And he was one of the most blessed men I ever knew. Now, let's keep talking about finances, because it needs to be talked about. In the churches we've traveled in, and I don't want to meddle with you, but let me say this, and I'll come to you, sir. In the churches we've traveled in, many of them, I had no clue, some of them, I had no clue where to even put my offering. They never mentioned it. Now, frankly, I think that's abominable. I think worshiping with your giving is one of the highest moments of worship. It's right up there with communion. It's up there with altar call. It's right up on the, we actually were friends with one of the members of Parliament of England. She preached at Covenant Church. She invited us. She took us on a private tour of even the Queen's chambers in Parliament. And we stood in the room where the Queen comes before going to Parliament. And it was like, oh, man. It was like we whispered. And I thought if the Queen would come in right now, what would I do? I would kneel. But if I didn't have a gift for her, it would be inappropriate. You're supposed to take a gift. So maybe I'd take her a jug of North Carolina honey, something. But something to present. Even if I'm going to see the Queen of England, I would take a gift and I would go to God. God said, nobody comes before me empty-handed. Don't run away from offerings, pastors. Talk and never joke, never trivialize it. Don't say lift or take. Don't wait till it's time for an offering to have ushers. No, that's a dignified. Have the elders do it or somebody, have them do it honorably. And we did it from the back to the front for years, and then we changed, and we'd come to the front and go to the back so they'd see the ushers coming and be ready when they got there. And then we'd have them come back and stand, and I would pray over them, and I said, we're going to save 3 minutes, and we're not going to do that anymore. And one Sunday I said, okay. you know, don't come back to the front. Let's go on to the place where you count the money. And the next time we had an elders meeting, it's one of the few times in 39 years that the elders chastised me, and they said, Pastor, what do you think you're doing? And I said, trying to save 3 minutes. They said, save it somewhere else. We think offering is important. Okay, so we're talking about finances and money. But remember, we've got to bifurcate. And that's not barping in a bag on an airplane. Bifurcate, we've got two paths here. One is our path, and the other is the path of being a pastor and a minister. So one is our family. Do we have a plan for our family? Now, I'm going to liberate you a little bit and say to you, I met a pastor the other day who was still a licensed electrician. And I said to him, you know, thus and so, thus so. He said, I don't know how we can afford that. I said, if I were you, I would peel off 5 to 7 hours, a couple days a week, and I would disappear. As pastor of Covenant Church, there was many of a night that I put in my full day with the church, went home and had dinner, and at 7 o'clock or so would kiss my children goodbye and my wife and go out the door in dress clothes with a bag or a suitcase or something, go across town and walk up a sidewalk looking like a preacher or something, but go inside and put on my construction clothes and hang sheetrock and do woodwork and finish so that I could pay my taxes. I did that as pastor of Covenant Church, and my congregation never knew it. Let me say to you a word of liberty, and you want to write this one down. You have a right to your private life that is bigger than being a preacher in the church of God. You do not deny your personality and who you are and your responsibility to your family because you're a pastor. I know that may seem a little bit direct, but I want it to really land because I've seen too many pastors. Okay, in Virginia, a few weeks ago, one of the churches we visited, a pastor 70 years of age. And I asked him as we sat across and we paid for his meal, I said, well, now tell me. No, actually, somebody else volunteered to pay for that. And I said, tell me how you are and where you are. And he said, well, I said, tell me about your home that you've got prepared at age 70. He said, I don't have a home. Tell me about the land you bought. I don't have any land. Tell me about your savings. I don't have any savings. And I said, what do you have? He said, my wife and I have $2,500 Social Security per month. Hello, his wife died 2 weeks ago. About 40% of his $2,500 is gone. He is now 70 years of age, single, and two of the main church members, the biggest tither in his church, died. Both died, husband and wife. So he lost his wife and two church members within a month. And he's 70 years of age. He has no plan for the future.
He actually worked for that church member to have a little extra income. The church gives him $500 a month. And so his source there is gone. His friends, his biggest tithers in his church, and his wife.
I have sat on state councils when we have raised money to buy a piece of land and a modest mobile home for pastors retiring, had nowhere to go. Now, I don't know how old you are, I don't know your circumstances, but I do know this. I know there are smart people out there. And I know that if you, whatever, you know, here's the thing that just really gets me. We're kind of what we call blue collar and a little above, middle class. And so we kind of feel offended when people talk to us about money. Well, I manage my own money. Nobody's going to tell me what to do. You know, it's kind of like when I said to the church at Charlottesville, I think we need to paint the brick on our church building. And they said, what? Paint brick? I said, yeah. I said, I know people like us, we lay brick and we think it's supposed to be that till Jesus comes. But I said, rich people actually lay brick so they can paint it. People kind of, in our level of society, we manage your own budget, and rich people pay people to manage their money. Why don't we just up it one notch and realize there are people who can help? And sometimes they're in your own church. Sometimes they're in your family. Sometimes they're neighbors. And why would you ask? Sir, I promise you I'll give you a chance. You have a question? Personal debt. This comes under that score. What you need is someone to help you. I have sat many times as a pastor and helped people work out of their debt situations. Now, I'm not an expert at it, but I'm pretty good at it. And I can generally bring people in at about 45% of their total debt, and all, but there's a way to do it, and I don't have time to tell you that. But you need someone, let me share something with you that I know to be a fact. If you're behind in some debt somewhere and you're up against it, you are not the negotiator. They won't believe you when you call them because you're the one that's behind. But if you get somebody else to call and negotiate, they will negotiate. So you need a negotiator. You need a middleman in there. Okay? Does that make sense to you, everybody? So I'm saying to you, find somebody. You need to start bringing that debt down. I'm hoping we're going to sell our home in Virginia. And we'll be completely out of debt by God's grace when that happens. And it's a beautiful, the home's not so gracious, but we have one of the best views in 3 counties. So we think the view will sell. And so we're going to sell because that's not important to us now. What's important to us is things like tonight, ministering to you. We're actually right now living, where, Layla? Where are we living?
We're living in a 2-bedroom, cinder block apartment.
Concrete floors.
Concrete floors in the international housing for the School of Theology. We live among the students, international students. We're thrilled to be there because we love that. We're having the time of our lives.
I said, Layla, why am I so happy in this concrete little 550 square feet? And then the next day, I figured it out. I have no responsibility. I don't even have to change a light bulb.
Okay. But our home, we've lived there 18 years, and I've loved that home. And the thought of moving out of that home has torn me to pieces at times. But I've always prayed, God, never let me have something that I wouldn't be willing to give up for you. If I'm not willing to give it up for you, I don't want it to begin with. So that home, I thought my heart was just going to rip out when the time came. But you know, when God says go, somehow that home doesn't have the charm for me it did before. I will always have wonderful memories of the events we had there, the people we hosted there, the views, the snow, the sun setting. And I love it. I'll always have those memories, but I don't need it the rest of my life.
And we can't do it now, Layla. We can't. We would put out sign-up sheets at Christmas time, and anybody could sign up. We'd have 20 to 50 people at 10 to 12 events in our home. And so, you know, we've had thousands of people in our home. But it's time to go. It's just time to go. Now, we're talking about finances, and I want you to really log this in. If no one knows your finances but you, that's a terrible mistake. I mean, you need somebody you can trust, and not a lawyer. I've already worked too many wills, been in court too many times. Part of my background is police science, criminology, law enforcement, and I've been in court more than most pastors ever dream being in court. I've helped settle lawsuits and other kinds of things and been witnesses. I've been professional witness in federal court. So I've been in court. You don't want a lawyer handler. I saw one estate depleted by about $1 million because the lawyer was the executor. Never a lawyer. Find somebody, and then you need to stack down 2 or 3 below that in case that person dies or refuses to. That's what you can do. You need to do that. And if you don't have a will, I beg you, even tonight, you know, there's what you call, if I can only think of it, but if you handwrite out, date and handwrite and sign it, it is a legal will.
Mail it to yourself.
Mail it to yourself.
Postmark on it.
Do something immediately, and then make sure that somebody knows where to find that. Because people, how many of you pastors have lived to see nightmares when people died and didn't have a will? How many family members have we known? No. You must, and you should have a living will. That means that if the doctor says my brain is dead, what do I want to happen? Because someone of your children's liable to step in and say, keep mama alive, keep daddy alive, keep him alive, keep him alive, keep him alive. I can't stand. No, I believe God's going to do a miracle. I believe God's going to do a miracle. When the person said before, they said, if I get like this, let me go, but they never wrote it down. So nobody can override. Now the children have authority now that they're no longer mentally competent. So you should have a living will, and you should have a will saying what's to happen with your estate. And then, Layla, I want to drop back with family. Tell them what you came up with, because this is all part of fiduciary of a family, about what was in our home. And you said, I'm asking your permission to do this in our home.
Okay, people give you very nice gifts when you pastor, and you appreciate them, you like having them. And then something happens and those people fly away. You know, they're gone, they've hurt you, they've stuck a knife in you when they left. Yes, it's happened to all of us. And I'm walking through my house and I see that beautiful piece of pottery or something, and it reminds me not of the person, but of the hurt. Okay, the hurt that that person inflicted. So I have given away, sold, gotten rid of everything like that that brought back a bad memory. That is how I handled that. And one time, I was going through files and I came across this letter that somebody had written where they had really told us off. And I read it.
That's never happened. Honey, pass that up because that's never happened to anybody here.
And
All right. Go ahead.
I looked at that and I said, I'd forgotten that. And it was as if God put into my spirit, he said, yes, you asked me to help you forget it, and you're keeping reminders. So now I throw away things like that too. So,
pastors, this is kind of general, but let me share with you. As a counselor, I worked in a mental hospital for a while, so I became a professional, and it was my job to know how to interview people, mentally ill and their family too, that sometimes I thought were mentally ill. And
he worked in a mental hospital until I told him he needed to leave there.
So,
because of his actions. Now, actually, well,
go ahead, lady.
He was driving down the road in Newport News, and he stopped at a corner. And I said, why are you stopped here? And he said, well, the light's red. I said, the light is at the next corner. You've got to quit working there. So that happened.
Let me open up. Anybody got another question or comment? Question or comment?
I know we've said some things that have probably hit some of you wrong, that you don't believe just the way that we do on it. And if so, we apologize if we hurt you, but we really want you to consider what we've said. And if you have a better way, tell us. Maybe we need to reconsider. Okay?
And don't retreat. That's one of the things we're trying to say. You don't retreat. Go engage some people, and don't always engage people that are going to agree with you. No. You want to engage people that are intelligent and forthright and honest and who would. By the way, I want to ask you, do you know who your banker is? Do you know his name? Do you know the name of the banker where your church banks? Well, you should. And you should. I've gone into the bank in Charlottesville more than one time, and I've said, go ahead and punch into our account. You've got it on your computer anyway. Here's the code words. So pull up, and our finances all show up in the office. He said, yeah, okay, good. So what's on your mind? I said, I want you to listen. How long? I said, 15, 20 minutes. He said, I'll give you that. I said, finished. He said, what do you want? I said, nothing. I just wanted you to see where we are. He said, well, you don't need anything today. I said, no, but the day will come when I do, and I want you to know where we are. So the day came that we were going to do a major building program, and we had banks competing for our loan. Well, we'll beat that. Because they knew me. I knew them. I know my banker. I know his name. I know my broker. And I don't mean like I'm a rich man. I just mean if I want to do something, I know somebody, or if I want to help a parishioner, I know somebody that they can talk to who knows stuff. So I'm just kind of the gateway for my parishioners and for my family and for others. So, you've got, remember two things now you're working on financially. One is your own family. Your own family. What are you doing about finances in your own family? Do you have a plan? Is there a savings plan? Is there a plan for retirement? Is there a plan for the future? What's it going to take? They generally say that if you're debt-free, you need about $60,000 a year to have a reasonable life. I don't know if that's true or not true, but I do know that there is a number for you, and you need to know what that number is, and you need to figure, what if I became disabled today and could not be a pastor? How would I live? How would I make the future, and how would I take care of my family? Two, what are you going to do about the church? Brethren, sisters, clerks, you should have regular accountability. I'm from Virginia now. I went to Virginia, and I found a beautiful girl, and I ran out of gas, and I stayed up there a while, but I'm visiting back down here. But I'm from Virginia. I don't know your individual situations. I don't know what you do, but I do know this. I do know when pastors say, Boy, this is, things went better and don't know how I could stand it. I tell you, our church is doing really great financially. If those are one of the first two or three things I hear, I'm kind of panicky. That's not the measure. I tell you, I mean, we take care of our finances great, and I don't have to worry about that. No. As pastor, you should look at it every week. And by the way, I will confess to you down here in North Carolina that when I had trouble with a parishioner, one of the first things I would do would be to call up the accountant in the church and say, tell me their tithing record. Amen, Dr. Taylor? Tell me their tithing record. And like as not, they kind of begun to slack off a little bit. Well, hey, you know what? I'm not going to give a full ear to somebody that's dishonest with God. I'll be kind, be patient, but they're not going to bend me around the corner. So you've got two things you're working at here now. One, with your family, you're going to see how you can improve your personal skills. That's why we're here. Dr. Taylor, Dr. Bell, and I represent Pentecostal Theological Seminary. You've got a high school degree. You can now enroll in a 90-hour, credit-hour certificate course, and you don't even have to go back to college. You can take it through the Pentecostal Theological Seminary, $100 per hour, $9,000. From high school, you can go directly to graduate school and be accredited degree. Yes. I'm going to say this a little bit carefully. Listen to me. Pastors, it is possible for your church to go further along than you are. And it will stalemate because you're not growing with them. You've got to be in the wind to be blown to the future and change like you need to change for the people that you're leading and stay ahead of them. I know that, yeah, it's true. And you've got to be willing to. The hardest thing that I did in my ministry, I've got 6 minutes left. The hardest thing, if you say, what's the toughest change you ever made in 44 years of being a pastor? Actually, 60 years of being a minister. It was changing my style of preaching. I grew up Western North Carolina. First church I pastored, if you weren't wet with sweat when you were through preaching, you weren't anointed. And so help me, the first church that we pastored was a bunch of Methodists, and it didn't matter what I did, they just sat and looked at you.
They were good people.
My goodness, they were good people. They were good people. And then one Sunday I had 3 rows of Spanish with headphones, and they were looking with the translator through the wall, and they turned and they looked.
That's at our second church.
That's at the second church. Yeah. And thank you, Layla. They looked through to the window, and they couldn't see the person. It was like, hey, what's he saying? And after church, I went to the translator, and I said, hey, what happened in the middle of my sermon there that 3 rows of Spanish people are looking at you? And they said, well.
She said, our words that we use, we're from different countries, and we use different words for different things. And I just told him he's just telling some North Carolina story.
So I think he's talking about green beans in North Carolina. And I said, well, now, it makes no sense for me to be up here preaching if people don't know what I'm saying. And I had to stop preaching like I had preached all my life and learn to talk sermons through. When I had Burmese sitting in front of me who couldn't speak a word of English, or Congolese.
Or could I understand just a little?
They didn't understand a thing I was saying. By the way, let me finish. Why am I wearing this? It's what I wore when I was a pastor. Things like this. I rarely wore necktie. And the reason why is because our people would say, will you wear something from my nation? I say, sure, if you bring it. Because I couldn't afford some of the things they brought. I don't know what this cost in Nigeria, but this represents Nigeria. And Bishop Alex Abiola is our bishop for Nigeria, and he will not build a church unless he puts down a well in the yard. Because Muslims will not allow Christians to drink from their wells, but Christians invite anyone to come and get water from a Christian well. So when he builds a church, then he puts down a $3,000 well. And if you want to do that, by the way, we'll connect you. And when you put down the well, Bishop Albiola will send you a shirt like this, and you can wear it in your church. And generally speaking, they go into communities totally Muslim, sometimes no Christian there. They build a church building, and then they go in and put the well down, and there's no Christian there, and they invite people to come get water, and a couple of 3 years later, there's typically 50 people or so who are converted Muslims. So I would wear this, but I would also tell the story of Nigeria, the culture, the politics, the economy, so that the people became kind of international in their minds. Layla, a word?
Just a quick word. One of the things that we did to build a mission church was every first Sunday, we encouraged our people to wear their native clothing, the clothing from the country of their origin. And we would wear something from a different country too, and we would have a communion that Sunday, and that's one of the most beautiful memories in my mind, watching people march down the aisles in all these different outfits. Well, they all wanted us to wear things from their country, so we got a lot of free clothes that are really beautiful and really nice, and now we're wondering what to do with them. So if you know of something that we could do to donate with them, I'm going to wear something tomorrow. We're going to keep some and wear them, but we don't need all of those things anymore. And so somebody pray with me about that. I want it to go where it counts.
No, tomorrow morning at 9:30, right, Bishop? At 9:30, we're going to take up a subject of pornography. Yes, we're going to talk about it. I can tell you stories that would wring your heart out. And the one thing I will leave you with, for those who won't be here to hear it, I've done a pile of counseling in my day and working with people in prison, out of prison, and other kinds of things. I've been into groups where people were doing drugs while I was there and even had the dog doped. I've had my life threatened. Been there. Here's what I want to tell you, I want to leave you with. I believe in the power of amphetamines and whatever else, but there is no drug more powerful than pornography. None. It is the most addictive, if not one of the most addictive sins under heaven. We're going to talk about it a little in the morning. Hope to see you at 9:30. Father, take the things that we've shared and divide them to these people and help them to find some friends they can talk to and some people who will surround them with loving arms, and that none of us would fall down, but that would be strong and powerful for you. We ask that you would make us individually be better people and then equip us to be better servers in ministry. In Jesus' name. And the people said amen. Thank you, Bishop Bell. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Bear. We're going to take a break. We'll meet back at 7 o'clock. Now, listen, folks, I want you to fellowship. Try to stay 6 feet apart. Bump hands. Just be careful and enjoy your time. We'll see you back at 7 o'clock.